All right, guys, what is up? We are back here. Here's a Shopify award for credibility, although we are not talking about Shopify today. We are talking about how to fix your depression and how to get rich. Two very important things in life if you want to be successful. And I'm being a little bit facetious here, but this is pretty important stuff. And I'd like to share a bit of my story and how the stuff I learned from my experience of trying to solve both of these problems, how that went and how you can maybe glean some lessons there from that if, you know, those are two things that you're trying to solve for, fixing depression and getting rich. So I'll start with the depression part because the first thing is that everybody experiences this at some level or, you know, some level or another. And one thing that has started to annoy me a little bit is people, they go, oh, like there's depression and then, oh, there's clinical depression. Like it's two different things. And as someone who's like really delved into this stuff for a number of years, my personal opinion as a unqualified YouTube, whatever, nobody, is that it's all on the same spectrum. You can't just add these divides in and say, it's like you say that some people are just, oh yeah, they're clinically depressed, and the other people are just like, what, they're normally depressed? I know some people get it worse than others, but that's always bothered me because on the one hand, it basically creates this separation where people are left wondering if they're actually defective, because everyone immediately assumes that they're depressed, and then they hear, oh, well, some things you can fix with lifestyle, but sometimes you're just clinically depressed. And it's like, what? Then you're just broken and you're done and you can't get better. So I, for myself, decided to throw that out the window because I was really stuck. And I always came up against that wall of, as soon as I believed that maybe there was something clinically wrong with me, it would become a limiting belief that I would not believe I could get better. So for some context, it was I was around 18, my first year of college. And looking back, I have insight around why it was around then that I really kind of fell into this depression. But it was around that point of view, or around that timeline. And then it was through my early 20s and kind of really till around like 25, 26. And it probably wasn't like till 27-ish, 28, where I really felt like I got through it and had kind of learned what the reasons were, learned how to deal with it and all that. And I think that happens to like a lot of people. There's certain kinds of people it happens to more, typically super empathetic people, more sensitive people, more creative people, people with bigger dreams. Like, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but just typically the bigger the mismatch between what you know you're capable of and what you want to do, and this is going to play into the rich part, the bigger the distance between that, you're going to feel that in your life, in your heart, in your emotionally, because your heart knows what you're capable of and what you should be doing, but your situation might be so different because you haven't developed those skill sets yet, or you're in an environment where you can't make use of your creativity or your talents. And so all of this plays into the reasons that you're depressed. So I'd kind of split it down the middle, where there is kind of the spiritual, mental, thinking side of it. But then there's also just the very like physical, like biological stuff. And the two need to work together if you want to kind of fix what you're going through. So I kind of did it the reverse. I started with like it was like therapy and like the limiting beliefs and the spiritual stuff and trying to, and the fears and trying to untangle that, which is very difficult when you just feel shitty. And that the feeling shitty part should be solved for first. I think just to get stable. And that's like the diet. Like that's why I talk about the carnivore diet. That's why I talk about the keto diet. That's why I talk about, this is more in other videos and earlier on, but lifestyle stuff to get stable. Because what people don't know is that you can literally change your brain. You can change your mental state. You can change your, so much, your mood. You can literally feel better. You can feel happy by changing your diet, by having a schedule, by going for a walk in the morning, going to sleep at roughly the same time, waking up at roughly the same time, having a project to work on. And when I was at my worst, I was like having panic attacks all the time. I couldn't focus. I was depressed. I was always trying to solve. I was ruminating. My brain was just on like I literally had like a pain on my head because of how bad the anxiety was, and I couldn't get away from it. And every waking moment I was trying to get away from it, and that's how bad it was. And it was through these levers of lifestyle that I was able to create some space around that and then make better changes and continue to improve, which leads to the rich part. So these are all like whole topics because I think it's worth getting more into that, you know, and the good thing now is there's so much information available, like for diet, meditation. You can literally rewire your brain with meditation. You can create space between those thoughts and that turmoil. You can literally do that by meditation. So I got into meditation for like 2 or 3 years. I was really into it. I was pretty much doing it every day for like 10, 20 minutes. And that helped create some space. That helped to slow down. I recommend what's something called ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. You can look into that. And all these things kind of help set the stage to just get me stable from a place of just kind of freaking out, panic attacks, you know, always walking that line of, is there something clinically wrong with me? And I think so many people go through this and it just doesn't get talked about. And then they, you know, some of them just end up on meds, thinking there's something wrong with them for the rest of their life. And that's really sad because a lot of those people are those creative, ambitious types. And then they get kind of stunted and they stay in this place, and it's terrible because they never fully actualize. This is ultimately about actualizing. It's about actualizing. And the tough thing is, if you have lots of things that need to be actualized and they are not being actualized, and you are doing things on a daily basis that like do the opposite of that hurt you, that harm you, that stunt you, that trap you, then you're gonna be depressed. It makes sense that you're depressed. I think that's what the big unlock for me was, realizing that this stuff was information. Certain foods, drinking too much, you know, made me feel shitty, and I started to put the pieces together and was like, this actually matters. I need to start slowly unwinding the path of the things that make me feel better, the things that make me feel worse. And what's cool is that as you evolve down that path, you keep doing that, and you'll not only do damage control on feeling bad, you'll start to leverage this sort of problem-solving mindset towards feeling really good and towards building really cool shit and making money and starting cool businesses. And it's like this trajectory that kind of keeps going. So going back to the depression piece for a second, you got to get the lifestyle stuff dialed. There's tons of awesome channels on that. You know, you got Huberman, always recommend Dr. Chris Palmer, who talks about the ketogenic diet for mental health. It's legit. You can just Google on YouTube. You can, you know, basic stuff. Get a schedule in order. Have some projects. You know, stop drinking for a little bit. Depending on how shitty you feel, you're going to want to pull more strict levers. I did straight up strict carnivore for like 4 months, and it was a massive lever for me in terms of feeling really good, getting to a point of stability, and then adding other things back in. But that's the environmental stuff, the diet, the sleep, those pieces, even your relationships. You need some good relationships in there. But then on the more spiritual, mental side, ultimately, if you are hiding from things, if you are hiding from feelings or emotions or things that you don't want to admit to yourself, that's going to cause problems, because you can't live that. You can't live shutting things out. So you need to learn how to make room for those things. And that's where there is some of that therapy stuff where, if you're terrified of something, there's kind of like you need to start learning to, it's basically exposure therapy, but letting that into your mind, or letting that, you know, that feeling. If you're angry, maybe you're angry at your parents, maybe you're angry at someone. I'm not saying you act it out, but just like you need to learn that you can let these feelings come up, because otherwise they're going to come out in weird ways. And not to, that's just kind of how it works. It's kind of that simple, where some things, if you're really trying to push them down, it's like, okay, you need to just start acknowledging that. You don't act it out and get weird. Unfortunately, you see a lot of people, they go and they get therapy, and then basically it turns into this, like, they think they need to almost go take that anger out on their parents, or they get bitter, or they start acting really weird and they're angry at the world. And that's the wrong side of it. You need to take responsibility. You need to accept these things and take responsibility. But the goal here is to not act out, you know, anger or bitterness or things like that. It's to take responsibility, explore that shadow side of yourself, and then start working through that. And so that's just like one of the obvious ones. Like if there's an emotion or a thought or fear, something that you're really afraid of, you need to start exploring that, and you need to slowly expose yourself to that. That could be done with a therapist. That could be done on your own. Could be done with some journaling. That's where exploring some of these mental models around like acceptance and commitment therapy are helpful. Committed exposure to something you're scared of tends to be the biggest thing you can do to improve your life in any area. It's like you're afraid to get rejected with sales, you should do more sales. You're afraid to get rejected by a girl, you should go talk to more girls. Like that is what it comes down to. But you just have to peel that back and do the small things for what you can manage, and then you progress. So that's kind of the one thing. If there's something you're afraid of that you're not accepting, you got to open the door to that. You got to see what's going on there. The other thing is if straight up, this was an unlock for me, you might be believing a lie about yourself. Like this goes on the mental sort of spiritual side. If you believe a lie about yourself that you were told at some point in your life, like you're not good enough, you're not lovable, you can never get better, people don't actually like you, if you are yourself, people will reject you. Those are lies, and you need to bring those into the truth to be dispelled. Because if you believe lies, then you will live in a cage, and that's obviously not what we want. And that was a really insightful one for me. That was a massive takeaway because I just kept feeling trapped. I kept feeling trapped, and I was trying to figure out why am I in this mental model, and believing or acknowledging at a certain point. I was like, even you can write it down. It's really simple. It might even sound stupid. You're like, oh, I believe I can't get better. It's like, oh, that is a lie. Like that is a belief that is a lie that I'm believing. Or I believe that people will not like me if I'm myself, if I'm actually myself. That's a lie. You believe these lies, right? And you can't control other people, but it's more about these lies that maybe you got put in your mind early on, and then they get power over you. So to sum up there, you got to get stable with your environment, your food, your lifestyle, all that stuff. You've got to identify the things that are really messing with you. Then you've got to, if you're running or hiding from something, or a memory, or a fear, or an emotion, or anger, or whatever it is, like you got to explore that. You got to start dealing with that. And then, you got to see if you're believing a lie about yourself, about who you are, about, what's possible for you. And those are kind of the very brief overlap of like the depression side of it. And the cool thing is, which I alluded to before, once you start to operate in this way, this opens up new doors to the rich part. Because once you sort of break out of the box of like, oh, I'm just like depressed and I should be sort of fixed or maintained so where I can lead the quotes normal life. It's like, no, that's the stunted mentality. That's the medicated mentality that then pacifies you into working some dumb job that you hate, being depressed in a relationship you can't stand, with a life you hate, and just like medicating yourself till you die. That's bullshit. We don't want that. But when you start to unlock and become a detective around your feelings, around what's going on, around what affects you, you start to mess with some more projects, and you start to learn what actually lights you up. You start to lean into the upsides of your personality, your innate interests. That's where you start to let your curiosity run. You start to have projects. You start to figure stuff out, and you realize that once you break down those early limiting beliefs and those early lies, there's all these other lies that are almost put on us by society that keep people in a box around what they can accomplish, what they can do, what is possible for their personal career, and all these other things. And you start to become this artist with your ideas. You start to become an artist with your ideas, and you start to work on projects. You start to lean into these business ideas. You start to take action. You start to apply the same sort of problem-solving mentality and potential. That idea of the potential that's there for healing, for growth. You start applying that into your life and your career, and you lean into the ideas. And that's where you experience the downsides earlier on, because you weren't in a place to explore your creativity and to lean into your obsessions and to do that in a healthy way. The flip side is once you get this stuff healed in the right way, you then move into the positive side, which is like the building, the growth, the creativity, all of the beautiful gifts that you have to essentially build things. Because I believe this is a pretty common thing where often creative builder type people. They can be the addicts, they can be the depressed people, but once they start to get some of that stuff channeled, you can do amazing things. So for me, it was that detective work. It was a lot of that stuff in my earlier 20s to my mid 20s to kind of just get stable, and then I almost fell into that pacifying mentality where I was still scared to stand out, to be different, to kind of really go in on my ideas, even though I sort of tried and kind of half-assed it. But I kept doing that slowly, and then I did get little breaks, and I did have little signals, just in my heart about the spark that was there for building and for pursuing my projects, which I talked about in the previous video, the spark and why you need to protect that. But that literally, once I'd broken down some of these, it becomes a superpower. The fact, if you can get through the anxiety, if you can learn how to navigate that, if you can learn that depression is information, if you can learn that there's no light without the dark, like you start to become this sort of like alchemist of life, and you realize that other things are possible. Not only in the solving of and the navigating of that darkness do you return. You don't just return to like a middle. There's like this whole positive side that comes with it, because it's almost that idea that for every reaction there's an equal and opposite reaction. The lows of the lows can springboard you to the highs of the highs, and that seems to be just the way life works. So it's not guaranteed. I'm not saying if you got depressed it means you're going to be rich. I'm just saying it's a wider there's a much wider sort of spectrum to the human experience, and typically people don't allow themselves to spring back to that amazing potential, because they are in a maintenance, medicating, pacifying mindset, and they're trying to get back in the normal box, and that is a trap. You do not want to get back in the normal box. You want to be a detective early on, get stable, solve those problems, explore that, and then let that launch you into the next stage, which is the building stage, which is the business stage, which is even the emotional, path that you have experienced, the turmoil or the inner darkness that you've experienced is now an asset that is a deep understanding of human nature, and it creates the potential for a deep richness in the content you write. This stuff has informed my copywriting even. It's on the backdrop of this drama, of my personal drama. This stuff can make you a master copywriter. You understand the fears, you understand the insecurities, you deeply know what people are going through, because you have this rich personal experience of the bigger human experience, and that can become a massive asset in the content that you create and in the emails that you write, in the way that you see the world. So this was a little bit more of a vague, esoteric video. Hopefully this made some sense or related to someone out there. And I really just want to encourage you, if you are someone who is struggling, if you are someone who is early on in the journey, I think that's the toughest thing. When you're early on in the journey, you're going to want to skip steps. And maybe my final tip is kind of in contradiction to some of the hustle culture or the self-improvement stuff, is like maybe go a little slower. Maybe give yourself permission to just do some small things to improve for now, and trust that when the timing is right, you're going to get the chance for that bigger swing, that bigger business idea, or that bigger period of progress. But for now, I remember at my worst, I had to accept kind of a lower quality of life than I wanted to in order to get to a higher quality of life, because unless you accept where you're at, you're going to always be pushing away or hiding from those things, like I said before, and you don't want that. You need to live in acceptance. You need to come to acceptance even at the lowest of the low, to then get things in order and get back to the highs. So hopefully this helped. Like the video, comment, whatever. Peace.